Alright, so a few things to remember at incarnation. At incarnation, these souls, of which you were one before you came to earth, did not have a self-awareness. At that time, you also did not have a sexual identity. You didn't realise your own self, and you didn't realise yourself as an individual. You also didn't know yourself as a half of a soul, right? At that particular point when you incarnated, unless your parents knew that there were soulmates. Now, because most parents on earth have no idea about soulmates, of course they never consider that there is perhaps a soulmate, and so that emotion doesn't flow through them, so it can't flow through you once you incarnate. So when we separate from our soulmate during the process of incarnation, at the time of separation, there is no knowledge of that separation. There is no consciousness of that separation. It is only after the separation occurs and when we start to be individualised, in other words, when we come to earth, that we start having a consciousness of ourselves. So it's very important to understand that there is no consciousness of the soul separation in the soul half when it first incarnates. And there's a very good reason why that's the case. Because if it was conscious of it, it would actually go through many terrible emotions right at that point, before it even incarnated. Does that make sense? Yes. So to incarnate from a not unconscious state, remember the soul still has personality, but is unconscious of itself. When it incarnates, that's the process of creating consciousness of itself. In other words, the process of incarnation is essential for you learning that you're an individual and can exercise your free will. But after a while, you start learning actually that you want to connect to one other person and you want to have this other connection. And that's when you start developing this longing inside of yourself that starts growing for a soulmate. Does that make sense? Now, the reason why I'm bringing up soulmates in this sex and sexuality discussion is because in the end, God intended that you have sex with your soulmate. And in the end, God in fact intends, if you progress spiritually through all the spheres of the 7 spheres, and then you go above that to the 21st sphere, and eventually you go into a soul union state where you reunite with your soulmate on every level. And in that level, you are one soul again. You're not 2 separate beings. You are one soul that can express itself however it desires. Oh, it's just that if you don't speak through the mic, then we don't get it recorded, that's all.
Do many people find their soulmate on earth and become one sort of thing?
Many people find their soulmate on earth, but often do not have a soulmate relationship with their soulmate. The reason why is a soulmate relationship is dependent upon you having a pure emotional condition. All of your masculine and feminine injuries need to be released in order for you to have a pure connection with your soulmate. So for that reason, most people, even who meet their soulmate on earth, never have a soulmate relationship on earth. And most people in the spirit world have never had a soulmate relationship until they reach the first celestial sphere, which is the 8th sphere of progression. Most people never experience a soulmate relationship until then.
That's not very nice.
Well, we can. We can do it here, and that's why I want to show you all of this, so that you can do it all here. Does that make sense?
Is it possible for us to have more than one soulmate in this scenario, and how does that play on the twin flame concept?
When we talk about soulmates, we're talking about twin flames. Basically, it's the same thing. There is a common concept today that you can have more than one soulmate, but you can only have one twin flame. What I'm saying is that the world's concept of soulmate, the New Age concept of soulmate, is really about law of attractions. And that's not what I'm talking about when we're talking about soulmate. What we're talking about when we talk about soulmates is the twin flame type of connection where there is only one. There is only one soulmate for each one of you. Who feels that's a pretty bad deal? Some of you probably feel that's a bad deal, right? The reason why is because a lot of times we have emotions like, I want to choose who that is, but the choice has actually already been made for you. It's just a matter of you coming to recognise it. In other words, God created yourself and your soulmate as one entity.
Who will be your perfect partner once you deal with all of your emotional injuries.
Yeah.
So it's actually a good system. I still have some emotions about it to deal with myself. So.
Mary last night wasn't saying it was a good system. That's why I actually... Because last night the whole thing was totally different than that, I can assure you. Last night it was more like, you know, how come you're my soulmate kind of thing.
I think I was unhappy with our entire soul. It was all the identities and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Wasn't really that.
No, she was unhappy with her soulmate being Jesus, basically, that's the deal. And you being Mary. But you are Mary. Yeah. She's Mary Luck, so she's a Mary of the time. Anyway, I just want to draw another picture. If you have any feelings of anger or rage or those kind of emotions towards a male or a female, so in other words, if you have any intergender emotional injuries, you'll find that a soulmate connection can't really be attracted, or if it is attracted, it won't happen until you release those injuries. You will also find that you can't grow spiritually to at-one-ment while you have those injuries. So remember, we have the spheres of progression, right? So this was the transition between the 7th and the 8th sphere, was the transition of at-one-ment with God. So at this point we're at one with God. Now of course there's spheres above that. Remember, these are dimensional spaces. Remember, at this point the 6th sphere is the highest we can grow in natural love. The 6th sphere was that highest point. So remember those things from our introduction? Yep. Now, if we're growing in love, it makes sense, doesn't it, that as we grow in love, we must also be growing in our relationship, whoever we're having a relationship with, in love. So the more we reflect love in our partnership, the closer that we will get together. But if we do not progress in divine love, and remember the 7th sphere and above, we can't get to them without having divine love in our soul, right? So if we don't progress in our relationship with God, then I can't also progress in my relationship with my soulmate. Do you follow that?
Not at a soul level.
Not at a soul level. So we can have a sexual relationship, and we can even have a very good sexual relationship at this point where we're when we're perfected in natural love. We can have quite a good relationship between each other. But we will not be at one with each other, nor will we have the prospect of being at one with each other until we progress in divine love. So in other words, unless you choose to receive divine love, you will never ever be able to be also at one with your soulmate. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? It's a very important thing to understand, that unless you put your relationship with God first, you will never get to be at one with your soulmate. So I'm going to say that again actually. Unless you put your relationship with God first, you will never get to be at one with your soulmate. Does everyone get that? It's really important to understand that at the soul level even. Now God designed it that way so that you would have, when you had a soulmate relationship, it could be that it would grow ad infinitum. So as you're receiving divine love, you can receive more and more divine love that will and you can continue receiving divine love all of your existence. So there is a never-ending supply of divine love which you can receive and grow in. Now, as you grow in that, you then also, as a part of that, grow towards your soulmate. The two of you start becoming one again, in a conscious way, not in an unconscious way.
Is it worth pointing out as well that when we incarnate as halves of a soul, we don't have a consciousness of ourselves even as half of a soul, or that we have a soulmate, but there is a law of attraction that exists between the two halves of the soul, and as we actually develop in love ourselves, that law of attraction actually strengthens and heightens. So in fact, even if we just focus on our relationship with God and clearing our emotional injuries, we will attract our soulmate.
Yeah. So everyone follows that? So down the bottom here, here's our souls totally disconnected from each other in different bodies. And when I say totally, they're not totally, ever totally disconnected. There is a flow of energy that flows between yourself and your soulmate from the moment you incarnate. It's just that you're not aware of it. And so it feels like you don't have a relationship with your soulmate at that point. Does that make sense? And then as you start growing in love, growing towards God in love, each new growth you make actually brings you closer together to your soulmate, as Mary just said. Until eventually, way, way up above the 8th sphere and the 22nd sphere, you actually combine as one again. So, if we think about sex, obviously the sexual relationship gets closer and closer and closer and closer and closer until we become one in that as well. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. So that's what we have to look forward to with our spiritual growth.